Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about JavaScript arrays. And as you can see in this picture, this thumbnail is showing the different parts that make up on a JavaScript array. So like for instance, you can see we have the first index, we have this is element at index 8. Okay, so to begin with, the JavaScript arrays are one of the web development most versatile and commonly used data structures. Whether building a to-do list, handling API data, or performing complex data transformations, array will be your go-to tool. So array is one of the data types of JavaScript. And basically an array is a list. Okay. So the next up is on the table of contents. The first thing we'll look at is what is an array. The next part is how to create an array. So we first need to know what an array is, how to create an array. And the next one is how do you access an element in an array? Because as we have said, is that an array is a list that is used to store any valid JavaScript data type. So you can store a number, you can store a string, you can store an object, you can store another array inside. And the best part is that whenever you store something, you need a way to get it. So that's how we have this. So the next one is how to remove an element from an array. So yes, you can add data to an array, or you can add elements. They are called elements. And then you might need a way to remove it. Okay. Or them. So next thing is array methods. So I'm going to check about what are array methods and different types of array methods. The next one is array properties. So we'll check out array properties, and just for your reference is that a property is a variable defined inside a class. So that's what is called a property. We'll go and check them out. Next up is on looping through arrays. So how do you go through each item in an array? And the next up is robust ES6 plus array methods. So these are new methods that were introduced in ES6. The next thing is on copying and merging arrays. And then finally, we'll talk about common pitfalls to avoid. So let's start up on what is an array. An array in JavaScript is a data type used to store a list of items. So think of it, you have different items, and these items need to has to be either of one of the data types of JavaScript. You cannot store anything outside of a data type of JavaScript. So like for instance, we have a variable that is storing a list. So we call it, this is an array. So you can say fruits variable holds an array of fruits. All right, because we have fruit 1, fruit 2, and the syntax reads as it's the item, you add the items that you need, separated by a comma, and enclosed in square brackets. Okay, these items are called elements and can be numbers, strings, objects, or other arrays, or any of the valid data types of JavaScript. So a note here is that array are 0 indexed, meaning the first item is accessed with index 0. So let me open VS Code and we can get started. So we'll start with an array of fruits and then see the 0 indexing. So to begin with, we can create a variable fruits. So the syntax is you start with a square brackets. And if you start with a square bracket, what you have now is an empty array. All right. And then we can add items inside. So we can say mangoes, pawpaws, and then we have oranges, and then we have apples. So this is an array that is carrying fruits. But to also note is that an array can carry any other valid data type. So we can say random data is equals to, now we can have mangoes, Now we can have something else. We can have 20. We can have undefined. We can have not a number. We can have null. So this is a valid JavaScript array. An array can hold different types of data, but as a common note is that you should store items that are related. So if you have fruits, store fruits, a string of fruits, because having the same data type is easier to work with than working with different types of data. So the next thing you need to know is that arrays are zero-based indexing. That means indexing starts at 0. So if you are asked, what is the index of the mangoes in the fruits array? So you may be thinking of 1, 2, 3, 4, but in JavaScript, arrays are zero index, so zero-based indexing. So they are zero indexed such that the first item is given index 0. The second item is given index 1, index 2, index 3. So if you want to access mangoes, we could do console.log fruits of index 0. All right. And then if I run this script, we can say the item at index 0. So this is something we'll come to learn, but I can just show you, is that to access an element from an array, you need to use its index. So this is the syntax. So you call the array in place and then open square brackets. And then if you want to get purpose, we say this is zero-based indexing. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3. So purpose is index 1. This one should give us purpose. All right. Yes. So if we console log the fruit of index 0, index 1, we should get purpose. And that's it. So that's what we got. So we should continue with our second thing is how to create an array. I already showed you how to create an array. We have two methods. One is what we just showed. So this is how you create an array. You call the square brackets. Let's do it again. So fruits is equals to, you open the square brackets and then start writing the items. And as a good practice, use the same structure. Use the same data type. So if you want to store strings in the fruits array. But you can still store other different stuff, but it's good to have the same thing. So you have mangoes and apples. So the other way you can create an array is using the array constructor. So what is a constructor? So let me show you what happens. So the fruits array, this is called primitive data type. So this is a primitive data type. And this primitive data type, we have another way to create an array, which is using the constructor itself. So this fruits array inherits from a base class called array, right? Let me just give you an intro into classes. So we can say class animal, and then we can have a constructor taking the name, this dot name equals to name. So what is a constructor? A constructor basically is a class is a blueprint for other things. So let's say we have a person. Let person 1 is equals to, let's say, is an object. I'll teach about objects later. So person 1 is an object which has a name of TWT, then have an age of 20, and then blood type we can say I just want to show you. So we can create another person And this is the exact thing. So we have this, and the next person is called John. And then we have the age as 30, 40, and then we have blood type as warm. And then finally we have a dog. Let dog 1 is equals to, the name is Senape. And then we have an age of 3 or 2. And then blood type is warm. So these are different objects, and you can see how repetitive this is. So this is the reason we need a class. A class is used to group objects that have similar properties. So you can see this one has, all of them have the blood type of warm. So we don't need to keep redoing this. So what we could do that, and the constructor is used to initialize. So setting the grounds. Okay. So to construct means this is our class. This is what we expect from the class, but these are the values that are unique to each instance. So for instance, the name is very unique. So the constructor is called immediately before even doing anything in the class. So we're passing it a name and the age. All right. And then passing it this, the constructor initializes this for every other method that is available in the class. And as I said, a method is a function inside a class. So we can say move, and we can do console.moving. All right. So this function inside a class is called a method. And we can have something like, we saw that we can put it here on top or where we want. So we say that the blood type is similar for all animals. So we can say blood type is equals to warm. So what does this tell you? What does this? This tells you that each animal has to have a blood type of warm. Each animal that is created using this class, I can even use mammal, something like that. So each mammal has a blood type of warm. So we don't need to specify all these. All right, I'll show you. And then we come and initialize the age. And something we have, what is this? This in a class refers to the class itself. So this one essentially says mammal.name equals name. All right, the current mammal in place, the current instance. So if this is person 1, so person1.name equals person1.age equals, like this constructor sets up the defaults for this object. So let me just show you. So if you want to create a person 1, we can do new mammal and then pass name and age. Okay, we do the same for person 2. Let person 2 is equals to new mammal, and then we can do John and 40. Then we delete that. Now we can do let dog 1 is equals to new mammal, and then give it the name and the age is 2. So this has to follow the same order. So here we are asking for age, name and age, name, age, name, age, name, age. And you can see how precise this is. Now, in case we want to, let's say, function my get name, we can say console.log this dot name. We can do your name is this dot name. I hope you are seeing what I'm doing. So we created a class called mammal, and then we created this, a variable inside a class is called a property. All right. A variable inside a class is called a property. And then a constructor is used to set the grounds, is used to initialize, to set the, it's like setting up this object. Okay, so that before any other method is called, we said this dot name refers to the class itself. So the current instance dot name will give us the, let me just show you. So if I do console.log person1 dot get name, what do you think will happen? Your name is TWT. So don't worry about this. This is the return. And it returns undefined, but it's not an issue. This is the return of that method. Doesn't return anything. So if I returned, or maybe I can return. What do you think? Oh, I did console log twice. So all right. So your name is TWT. If I do dog1.get name, your name is Sinope. All right. So I hope you're getting what is happening here in the classes, such that, oh, you can also do person1 dot move, and we can also do person1 dot blood type. So your name is TWT. So you need to console log this. I hope you are getting. So a constructor is basically setting the ground. A property is basically a variable inside a class. This is a variable that is shared across all members in the class. And then an object is instantiated using the class itself, passing it the data that is required inside the constructor. So the fruits array inherits from a base class called array. All right. So this is a primitive data type. So there's another way to create an array, and we can do amos is equals to, and then use the new array. Then use the constructor. All right. The same way we did const person1 is equals to new mamo. Then you pass state twt and 20. The same way we did that, you can see the similarity. So we have a base class that is already defined in JavaScript called array. And then this is a primitive data type because it inherits from that array using something we call prototypes. All right. We'll talk about classes in a later tutorial, but just understand that this one is a primitive data type because it does not use the new keyword. It uses something called prototypes. And then the older way of using the constructor still works. All right. So let's go back to, you can see using the array constructor, you pass in the new array constructor the same way we did with our person. So we could do mammals, we have dog, well, and pass human. All right. And this one works the same way. So it has the same methods because this is directly initializing from the array constructor, from the class itself. But this one is a primitive, but still they have the same methods, same properties and all that. All right. I hope you did get to understand something. So we can continue. So to continue, we do this using the square brackets is generally preferred for readability and simplicity. All right. So the next thing is how to access an element in array. I already showed you how to using the index of the item. So if we have mangoes, we can do, if you want to get apples, we can do fruits, you call the function in place and then use square brackets and the index the item is. So we have 0, 1. then you do 1. Then if you console log, you get apples. So the next thing is how to add an element to an array. So we have different ways to add an element to an array. So we'll start with the spread operator, and then we continue to the push method. So how can we add something to the... So here we have two scenarios. Where do you want to add it? So the first thing, we maybe want to add it at the first element or at the end of the element. And we have techniques to add inside the elements, but that's not common. So to add an element in an array, we have different methods. The first method is called the spread operator. This is a new method, and it says new fruits is equals to, you start with the array syntax and then you copy from the previous array using 3 dots. All right, so this one has exactly the data that the fruits has because we copied. This one is what we call the spread operator. We copied from the fruits array, and then after copying, you can add our oranges. And then if you console log, new fruits, it has the oranges. So this one basically copies. That means we can even add it in the front. You can do oranges like that. All right, so the next method is the push method. So the push method adds an element at the end of the list and it returns the new length of the list. So this one is it modifies the existing list. So to add an element at the end of the list, we'd call the fruits dot push. This is a method that is in the array class that we can access. And then we say we want to push oranges. And then no fruits. So this method alters the existing array. So that's why we can do console.log fruits here, right? And then you can see oranges has been added. And then the next thing we have is the unshift. So this one works opposite of what the push works. It adds an element in the beginning of the list. So we can say unshift. This one will add in the beginning. You can see our oranges there. So let's continue. How to remove an element from an array. To remove an element from an array, we have two commonly used ways. The pop. So we have, let's add our oranges here. So we can console log previous and then call the fruits. And then to remove an element from the end of the array, we use the pop. We can use the pop. So we can say fruits.pop. And then this method returns the item that has been removed. So you can even console log instead of. So you can say fruits.pop. This one should give us a popped. All right, and then finally we can console log fruits dot we can console log the new fruits, and then let's see. So we popped oranges. The previous was this, and then this one is the new. So I hope you understand about that. And then we have the shift method. The shift method removes the first item. So this one works the way this one removes the first item. So it works like the pop, but now in the reverse. So shifted, and then you can see mangoes was shifted and removed. Okay, the next thing we need to learn is about array methods. So array methods, as I have told you in the class, is that a method is a function inside a class, and then all the other members that use the constructor, the primitive datas, inherit from it, and then they have access to the methods, as I showed you. So we have so many methods. I'll just show you we have just seen the push. We will talk about the join, the index of, and the at. All right, so console.log fruits. These are functions that are available for use. .join, and then the join needs a separator. So what are you joining with? So you can read even here, you can see a string used to separate one element from. So if it is omitted, it's separated by a comma. So if you do that, you can see the join returns a string of the items joined. We have the other one called index of, so we can console log index of fruits index of. Let's do the index of apples. So index of apples is 1. This one returns the index of a certain item. And if you hover here, returns the index of the first occurrences of the value in the array, or -1 if it's not present. So if you do something that is not present, it will return -1. So the next method is at. So fruits at index 2. So what is at index 2? So you have 0, 1, 2. We should get oranges. Right, so that's how the at works. It's similar like to the index of, but now this one is not the index of, but now this, instead of doing this, you use the at to get the item. It's a bit easier. It is a new function basically. So there are so many methods. So if you do roots dot, all these are methods that can be used to manipulate arrays in JavaScript. So you have reduce left, all those. All right, so let's continue. You can read more about array methods in the link that is provided. And then the final thing we need to check is the array properties. We said a property is a variable that is present in a class. So we have one property. So we have roots.length. You can see we are not calling it, but console.log three. So this one returns the length of the array 1, 2, 3. And then this one is a property because you can see we are not even calling it as a function. So this one is a property, and a property is a variable inside a class. All right, so the next thing we need to look for is how to loop through arrays. So to loop means go through each item in an array. And there are different ways to achieve this, but I'll show you the commonly used ways. So the first one we're going to check is the for loop. So the for loop follows this syntax. So we call the for, and then we initialize a count. Where do we want to start? We want to start at 0. Let I is equals to 0. And a condition for whenever I is less than, maybe fruits.length. And then what do? We add. And then console.log fruits. Now let's console log I and see what we get. So I used a comma there instead of. So let me add a new fruit. I don't know whether the bananas. So the for loop, the syntax of the for loop uses a very specific syntax, this syntax. And the for loop, essentially, we need an initial variable or an initial count or an initializer, which is what we do here. All right. So it's like we are creating a variable called I, which we give it 0, and then the second argument is the condition. So this condition is what determines whether we are going to call this body. So this one is a for loop body, and then whether are we going to execute this body is determined by this function here, the condition. And finally, we increment the condition, the variable, so that by doing this, what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? We want to achieve this. So we start at index 0, so that means we saw that our array indexing starts at 0. Because we want to loop in our array, the first thing we could do is we initialize to 0, and then after the first loop, we increase. This one is what is called the expression. Let me just hover here and show you. So this one is called the expression. So when the loop ends, this one is called, and then so let's go it manually. So it starts as 0. Is 0 less than fruits.length? We saw the length is 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. So we continue. We console log the current I, which is 0. This for loop goes back and runs this block here, which increments I to 1. This syntax is similar to, so I++ is similar to I equals to I plus 1. So we increment I to 1. Is 1 less than the fruits.length? Yes, we continue. It does that until the condition is false and it breaks out of the for loop. So here we are currently getting the indexes. How do we get the item? You ask yourself, how do we get an item from an array? We can use the index, fruits of I, and we get whatever we wanted. So I'm not going to stick too much on the for loops, but I'll create another tutorial about loops. So keep tuned. So the next thing is the forEach. So this one is one of the higher order functions. And the higher order functions basically is a function that receives another function. So we can do fruits.forEach. This is a new method. There is a new ES6 method that takes in a function itself. And what does it do? The forEach function runs the function that is passed to it on each item in the array. And what does it do? It injects the current item, the index, and an optional array, but we're not going to talk about that. Our main focus is the index and the item and index. So this one is also optional, but the item is mandatory. So it injects the current item, it is looping. We can give it any name. We can say fruit, and then we can grab the index and give it another name. And then if we come here and console.log fruit, we get our fruits as previous, and then we can also console log our index. That is the index of that item. All right. So the forEach function receives a callback function that receives three arguments. The first argument is the current item in the loop. The second item is the index of that item, and the third is an array, which you're not going to talk about. All right. Yeah. So the next thing we can check is the forOff. So this one is also a way we can use. So we can do for const fruit of fruits console.log fruit. Same scenario, so we get whatever we wanted. All right. So let me see the thing. It is not, you cannot hover, but this is how you can get each item in a forOff loop. The next loop we can check is the while loop. The while loop is similar to the for loop, but now the while loop is more bulky. So the for loop you have a syntax, but the while loop you do it your own way. So we can do let I is equals to 0, and then use a loop which takes in a condition where I is less than or equals to fruits.length, and then console.log. We get the index, so we can use the array indexing to work around, and then we call the array I++. So you still get the same thing because this one is similar to a for loop, but this one is a bit bulky. So we initialize a variable, we use this syntax, and then we increment it ourselves. But for a for loop, we are doing it all in one line. All right. So let's continue to some of the robust ES6 array methods. All right. So you have robust methods that are part of the array that help us do specific things. So let's take this scenario. I'll explain briefly about the advanced ES6 methods. So our main goal is to get something like this. We could use a for loop, by the way, but we have that function called the map function. It's also a higher order function, but the map function is a bit easier to work with. So to get such a thing, we could do for let I is equals to 0, I less than or equals to fruits.length, I++, and then you can console log fruits. Okay, so we have an issue here, but we're going to solve it. So I just realized we can't just console log immediately. We need to create another variable called const new fruits. Then we initialize it to an empty array, and then we can come and push. We talked about the push. We push the fruits of I plus I. So what are we doing? So we created an empty array so that it can hold the track. It can track our new array, because you can see this one is an array. And then when we are looping, we push into that new array fruits of I. That will give us the actual fruit in case mangoes. Then we add the I itself. And then if we console log new fruits, so if you console log new fruits, we have mangoes 0, 1, 2. I is less than. So we cannot use less than or equals. We can do less than, because if you do less than or equals to, we'll have another extra loop that we are not using. So we have mangoes 1, mangoes 2. Now using the new array method called map, we can do something like new fruits with index is equals to fruits dot map, and then as the previous function, this function also injects data into the function that it is passed. The first one is the current item, so it's the fruit, and then we can grab the index as I told you. So the second argument to the map function, the callback function passed to the map function, is the index, so we can return whatever we returned is whatever is like pushed to the new array. All right, so we can return so we have something, if we are using an arrow function, we have something called an implicit return. So this one is a return that is returned automatically without having us writing there. Let me just show you. So we can do return fruit as I, and if we console log, so if in console log Okay, so we have to, so we can prevent that and run this. All right, mango 0, apples 1, oranges 2, bananas 3. But in case it is a one-liner, we can do something called an implicit returns, whereby we remove the curly brackets. And this function is similar to the previous function. And it works the same way. So more on map function, we do have a tutorial here that you can learn more about the map function. I'll also link to a YouTube video I did about the map function. All right, we can talk. The next one we'll talk about is the filter method or the filter function. It's also a higher order function. And as I said previously, a higher order function is a function that receives another function. All right, so the same syntax. So we have filtered fruits is equals to, we call the fruits, and then we call the filter method. It takes in a function and it gives the same things that like the other function. So it gets the current item, we can call it fruit, and the index. All right. But if the index is optional, if you don't need the index, you don't need. So here you can see a function that accepts up to 3 arguments. The filter method calls the predicate function one time each for each element in the array, returns the elements of an array that meet the condition specified. So we need to supply a condition here. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we want to filter fruits that are less than or equal, fruits that's whose length, character length, is less than or equal to 7. So we could do fruit.length less than or equals to 7. So this one will hold fruits that are of character length 7 and below. Right? So we not console log them. Mangoes, apples. So let's just see there's an issue. So fruits.length 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they all have 7. So let's look for, okay, we can do something else. We can filter out based on other things. So we can say fruits of index 0. So the first character is equals to A. And it's on an apple, which the first character is A. All right, so the final method we are going to talk about is a method called the reduce function. So let me just copy this. Let me just explain briefly what the method function is. So the reduce method is also a higher order method or a higher order function that is part of the arrays, and it basically it reduces an array to a specified, let me just do this. Let me just write it. So we said this function is a higher order function. So this function receives 2 arguments. One of it is the callback function and then the initial value, right? So calls the specified callback function for all elements in the array. And the return value of the callback function is the accumulated results and is provided as an argument to the next callback function. So yeah, so that's the index. So to reduce something, mostly it is used to sum up based on some criteria. So let's assume the sum starts at 0. So this is the variable, the value of the accumulation. So we can, it takes in 2 arguments, no 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. It takes in 4 arguments. But you're going to need to talk about the first 2. So we have the accumulator and the current item. And then we can get the current index. I don't care about the current index. and an optional array. So whatever we are focusing on is the accumulation and the fruit. So what happens is that whatever you add here becomes the first accumulation for the function. So this function is called for each item in the array. So we want to sum up the length of all the characters in the fruits array. So it will start at 0, at a passing 0, and then the fruit. So what do we want to do? We want to get the total character length. So what we can do is, because in the first iteration we get 0 and bananas, so we can calculate the bananas, and the return is passed to the next function. So let me show you. So because we said this is an implicit return, we could do something like return accumulation plus fruit dot length. We could do that. And what did I say? I said the second argument to the reduce function is the accumulation or the starting point. All right. So we start at 0. The total starts at 0. And this 0, we said this callback function is called for each item in the array. So this 0 is passed in as the accumulation. You can give it any name. You can say cow, goat. But to make it simpler to use, we can use the accumulation. So this 0 is passed to this function. So during the first iteration, so let me even, I think I could sketch it out here. So during the first iteration, the accumulation is 0 and the current fruit is bananas. And then whatever this function returns becomes the next accumulation for the next iteration. So we want to calculate the total. What can we return so that it can be used during the next iteration? So we could do 0 plus the length of the bananas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 0 plus 7, which is equals to 7. And this one becomes the next argument. This one becomes the next argument, and we do the same thing plus the length of mangoes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This one becomes the next. So we have 14. The next function is passed in 14 and oranges. We do the same thing. So 14 plus the length of oranges, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 as well. That's 21. It is passed into the next, which is apples. Then this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we do 21 plus 6. And now, since this is the last item, this is what is returned by the dot reduce function. So this one is 27. So the summed up will be 27. And then let's console log and see if we exactly get that. So we can say console.log summed up fruits length. Did you see? This is very simple, and this is how it works. And you can do very complex things using this method. I could show you. I know time is gone, but let's do it. So we could have an object here. We can say name is equals to twt and age is 20. Name is John and age is 40. What if we want to sum up the ages of students? What if we want to sum up the ages of the students? That's your homework for the day. Make sure you do this and you write it in the comment section. So let's continue. So the next thing we need to learn is how to copy arrays. So this one I already showed you using the spread operator, whereby you can just, using the 3 dots, you copy the existing array. You get a copy of the existing array. It takes in each item and adds it inside the array. And then you can add more. I already showed you that. We have another function, another method for the array, which is called the concat. And let me just show you the concat. So the concat takes in one array and adds it to the next array. So this one is even similar to doing const new z is equals to x, y, similar thing. All right, so common pitfalls to avoid. Avoid using equals to copy an array, because if you do the original array is this one and you use a copy which is equals to the original, and then you change the copy, the original is changed. So let me just show you. So now when you push, it is pushing to the original array. So what you should do is make a copy. Don't mutate the existing array. Don't change the existing array. All right. And then instead of using the spread operator or slice to make a true copy. So instead you can use the spread operator as I showed you, or use a slice to use the, I've also linked to the slice function. So that's it from me, guys. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and also share this to your friends. And that's it. Happy coding.